We have been journeying together for the last number of weeks, exploring the work contained in the book, The 5 Invitations, written by Frank Ostaseski. He is the co-founder of the Zen Hospice Project in the San Francisco area. And the 5 Invitations is a result of his work sitting with hospice patients and gleaning from that experience just simple to say and deep and profound to practice ideas. We began with the first invitation, the simple idea of don't wait. Don't wait. We all have an expiration date. We just don't know what that expiration date is, but we all have one. And the idea of don't wait. Say the things that need to be said today. Let the people that you love know that you love them. Do the amends work and the forgiveness work that needs to be done. Don't wait. Seize the opportunities before you. And then we explored the second invitation, welcome everything, push nothing away. I think the welcome part is easy, especially if it's something that we are looking forward to or we enjoy to welcome those experiences and relationships into our life. And the challenge, of course, is to push nothing away, that there are things that happen in and through and around all of us that are difficult, unpleasant, and sometimes very much so, very much challenging. But to learn how to be with what is as it arises and push nothing away, realizing that there is a gift in everything that crosses our path, in every relationship, in every event, in every situation, even though sometimes it may be really hard to find it or to recognize it in the moment. And then last week we looked at the third invitation to bring our whole self into the experience. And we remembered what it was maybe to be that childlike version of ourselves that's filled with life and wonder and curiosity and feeling just plain comfortable in our own skins. And then how sometimes, or not sometimes, probably most of the time, in the journey toward adulthood, we begin to lose that, and how important it is to try to regain that, to be our natural, authentic selves. And that when we are that, we create a much more real way for people to know us and for us to know them and to experience genuine love and genuine acceptance. Today's invitation is the idea of finding a place of rest in the middle of things. I think the last part of that perhaps is the most challenging, or at least it is for me. Finding a place of rest in the middle of things. Say that with me. Finding a place of rest in the middle of things. What if finding that place of rest is actually not dependent upon changing circumstances? What if it's not about having to rearrange anything, but is something else entirely? This is what Frank Ostaseski writes about that. He writes, we often think of rest as something that will come to us when everything else in our lives is complete. At the end of the day, when we take a bath, once we go on holiday, once we get through all of our to-do lists, we imagine that we can only find rest by changing our circumstances. The fourth invitation teaches us that we can find a place of rest within us without having to change the conditions of our lives. It is experienced when we bring our full attention without distraction to this moment, to this activity. So he's telling us it's not about having to change anything externally. It's about how we are in the moment, no matter what is happening around us, when we bring our full attention without distraction to this moment, to this activity. One of the things I've been trying to pay closer attention to in myself is how easily I seem to get distracted. More so, it seems to me, in the last few years than I remember before. Maybe it's just because I'm paying attention to it more, I'm not quite sure. But I know that in the experience of distraction, that I'm really losing a lot. I'm losing being fully present in the moment, whatever it is I am actually doing or whatever conversation I'm actually having. And so just noticing that distraction. There's a Zen story of a young monk who is out in the courtyard vigorously sweeping the leaves away. And the Zen master wanders by and notices the young monk busily at work. And he teases the young monk and says, "Too busy." And the young monk looks back and says, "No, you should know there is someone here who is not busy at all." And the Zen master looks at him and teases him a bit again and says, "And who is that?" And the young monk holds up the broom. Very Zen. Very Zen. What the young monk is doing in that moment is essentially saying that though externally he looked very busy, in the actual moment he was at one with that activity of sweeping and at one with that broom. There was no separation. He was fully present. When we are like that, we have found rest in the middle of things. I was thinking about my own little version of that. We have a swimming pool in our backyard, and every once in a while stuff gets on the top of the water, and I actually enjoy, as long as it's not too hot, I actually enjoy going out there with the net and getting rid of whatever has fallen, the tiny little flowers or bugs or whatever falls on the top of a pool, I don't know. And John's noticed that over the years, and he says, "You don't mind doing that, do you?" I said, "No, it's actually like a meditation. For some reason, when I'm doing that activity," and there's a couple of others, but when I'm doing that activity, my mind is fully there. I'm at one with the water and the net and whatever the heck is on the top of the water in my pool. To be able to find rest in the middle of things. To find rest in the middle of things. I think that's such an important thing for us to do. The busier we actually are. We can look very busy externally. I guess that's part of the point. The young monk looked by appearances to be very busy, and yet inwardly he was still. We can look like we are resting on a hammock doing absolutely nothing and be totally distracted and busy internally. Which do you think is more truly finding rest in the middle of things? The experience of rest that is inward, that we can't judge it looking at somebody else and saying they're so busy. They clearly don't have that space of calm and rest within them. We don't know. It could be that they don't, or it could be they're very much like that young monk, busily sweeping, but being able to savor being fully present in that activity. So it's as if there's no difference or distance between what he is doing and the broom that is in his hand. Ostaseski writes, "Rest is found when we are present instead of letting our minds wander aimlessly through the hallways of fear, worry, and anxiousness. Rest comes when we become more by doing less, when we don't allow the urgent to crowd out the important. It is the result of decluttering the mind and decoupling from fixed views. Rest is a Sabbath when we stop and turn to worship the possibilities of the ever-fresh moment. Rest is a Sabbath. Remember the Sabbath day to keep it holy." One of the 10 commandments. Remember the Sabbath day to keep it holy. The idea of Sabbath is the idea of rest, the idea of moving into a different energetic way of being. We sometimes value too much busyness and activity and productivity at the expense of giving ourselves, both externally and internally, the opportunity to slow down a bit, the opportunity to rest. Do I have an amen to that? Is that not true? Do you, do you see that in yourself at times and in those around you? I certainly see it in myself, and I see it in many of those around me. You know, if we can learn so much from nature. I often use it as a metaphor because it speaks so much to me. Nature has a certain rhythm. Nearly all plants go dormant in the winter. And it looks like they're not alive. It looks like nothing is happening, but that's not true. In this time of dormancy, it's a time of renewal. It's a time of the roots going deeper down. It's a time of refreshment. I think it's also interesting that in the case of many trees, especially fruit trees, in the time of winter, the time of dormancy, that's the time that the gardener goes out and does the important work of pruning and shaping, so that then when the energy of new life, new vigor that expresses itself not so much inwardly but outwardly can really blossom and can really grow. The period of rest is not a period of nothingness. It's a period of renewal for us. A time, as is said in these words, a time to give our souls a chance to catch up with our bodies. A time to give our souls a chance to catch up with our bodies. That's a phrase I learned quite some time ago as a practice that certain indigenous and nomadic peoples have practiced for forever, it seems. That they would wander and wander and wander, and then all of a sudden they would stop. And when studied and asked why they would stop where they stopped, oftentimes their answer was, it was to give their souls, their spirit, a chance to catch up with their bodies. Isn't that a beautiful visual, a beautiful idea? It's a living Sabbath practice, I think. And so, too often we treat this idea of finding rest in the middle of things as a luxury, and actually it is a necessity. We need to look at this not so much as a destination we reach when we accomplish certain things, but to realize that it is an internal way of being, that we are about shifting from changing circumstances to anchoring our attention. Shifting from changing circumstances to anchoring our attention. Does that make sense? And we're anchoring our attention where and how? Right here, right now. Right here, right now. The young monk with the broom sweeping away, but fully present right here, right now. Shifting from changing circumstances to anchoring attention. For us, it could look like practicing micro-Sabbaths. We could pick one mundane, routine thing we do every single day. Everybody, I'm not going to ask you to share it. Think of one mundane, routine thing you do every single day. Important that you do it. Everybody got something? Practicing a micro-Sabbath would be to say to yourself that from this point forward, whenever you are doing that, whatever that is, that it is a zone of absolute presence for you. A zone of absolute presence for you. That when you're doing that, whether it's brushing your teeth or whatever it may be, that it is a zone of absolute presence, that your mind is not wandering. If you hold that as a practice, I can almost guarantee you that what will happen is you're going to discover at first how tricky it is. Because it's in those mundane things that we kind of disconnect and our mind goes helter-skelter everywhere else, right? So just notice it, whatever you picked as your micro-Sabbath that you're going to practice and declare it as a zone of practicing complete presence. Notice what happens the first few times you do that. And don't get discouraged Don't get upset with yourself if you go, oh my gosh, I finished brushing my teeth and my mind was all over the place. I never really paid attention. That's kind of normal what happens. As soon as we bring our attention to something that we want to change, we notice all the ways we're not doing it. And it's one of the reasons people can get so discouraged, because they think they're going backwards, when actually they're just bringing to the surface and bringing to awareness what always was, but they hadn't paid attention to it. Does that make sense? I think it's really important to know that. The core idea here is that to find rest, we have to look closely at what is pulling us out of it. So to find this kind of rest in the middle of things, we have to begin to pay attention to what is pulling us out of that rest. Where are we losing it? How are we losing it? And here in this invitation, Ostaseski talks about the Buddha's teaching of 3 poisons, and he names them in more contemporary language. The 3 poisons being demand, defend, distract. Demand, defend, distract. And so the practice for us would be when we notice that we have lost our sense of peace in the midst of things, and we notice that we take just a moment then to inquire inwardly of that, and to inquire what is it that has pulled us out of the moment. Is it that we are demanding? We are not accepting what is as it is. We're demanding that it be something else. Or is it that we are defending, which is another way of saying resisting, trying to push it away? That's going to knock us out of being able to be at that place of finding rest in the middle of things. Or is it that we are distracted, that we are let our mind wander every which way? And so the practice is always coming right back here, right back now, finding a place of rest in the middle of things. Take just a moment and think about your own life. Think about where and how you tend to lose this quality, this experience I'm talking about. Can you identify yourself where, some places where you tend to lose that? And then as you identify those, as you think about those, can you look a little deeper and inquire, well, what seems to be going on when you lose it? Are you demanding that things be different than what they are right now, instead of being able to breathe into what is and accept what is? Or are you pushing it away? Remember the invitation last week, welcome everything, push nothing away. Or are you just plain not paying attention? Have you let the monkey mind run rampant? All of this is it's easy to talk about it, I think. It's quite another thing to put it into practice. Quite another thing to put it into practice. To really be noticing what's going on up here, how we are interacting with our thinking, with whatever it is that we're doing, whatever it is that we're saying, whatever the action is or the activity is, to really practice mindful presence. He writes in this invitation the idea of minding the gap. Say that with me. Minding the gap. I smile every time I say those words, think those words, or read those words, because the very first time I encountered them was not in a spiritual context of meditation, but was in London on the tubes, where you see signs all in, like the subways, in the tubes, saying, mind the gap. That's the space between the platform and getting on the trains that move very fast. Mind the gap. And it says mind the gap because you don't want to get caught in the gap. and then have the train go by with half of you on the platform and half of you trying to get in the train. Mind the gap. Mind the gap. And of course, a spiritual practice is the gap actually between stimulus and response. Oh, that is the most powerful place that any one of us lives in. Between stimulus and response, the gap between what is happening and how we're going to interact with that is the most powerful moment, millisecond, because it's in that space, that gap, that if we are mindful, if we are exercising our minds, we can choose. We can choose to respond in whatever way we want. The challenge is most of us aren't minding the gap. We don't even realize there is a gap there. It is there. It is there. It is tiny, but it is there. And when we mind it, we step into a place of tremendous personal power, spiritual power, and the ability to make significant positive changes in our life. Think for a moment, or experience for a moment, your own breathing. Notice your breath. We do that every Sunday during our meditation prayer time. There is a space, there's a gap between each breath. As we breathe in, the natural rhythm as we breathe in, and then it's almost like there's a pause. We breathe out, and there's a gap. It's the feeling of that. It's the feeling of that that helps us to cultivate the ability to find peace in the middle of things. To find peace in the middle of things. Just a couple more thoughts here before closing. Thoughts about the importance of this practice, the importance of mindfulness, minding the gap. Ostaseski says, mindfulness results in a non-judgmental way of being. Think about that for a moment. Mindfulness results in a non-judgmental way of being. It's not a cure-all, nor should it be an attempt to spiritual bypass. And that is something that sometimes happens with frequency in unity, and I would say in science of mind as well. This thing called spiritual bypass, where instead of meeting the messiness of our life experience, the messiness of our relationships or failing health or crumbling situations in our lives, instead of meeting the messiness of life has suffering and life can be very, very chaotic and messy. Instead of meeting the messiness of life and dealing with it first, we want to cover it over with a pretty affirmation. And all that happens is it festers underneath that pretty affirmation until it gets really nasty. And we can't just cover it with spiritual bypass and affirmations. We need to actually meet it and heal it. Does that make sense? We often use the goal, this is from psychologist John Wellwood, who is credited with coining the term spiritual bypass. He says, we often use the goal of awakening or liberation to rationalize premature transcendence, trying to rise above the raw and messy side of our humanness before we have fully made peace with it. Trying to rise above the messiness of our humanness before we have fully made peace of it. I'm going to close with a description of this place of rest and meeting the rawness of life with a quote from a teacher I have always enjoyed learning from, and maybe you recognize his name, Ram Dass. Ram Dass. He says, this is what I think finding a place of rest in the middle of things is like. After many years of undergoing psychoanalysis, teaching psychology, working as a therapist, taking drugs, being in India, being a yogi, having a guru, and meditating for decades, as far as I can see, I haven't gotten rid of one neuroses. Not one. The only thing that changed is that they don't define me anymore. There is less energy invested in my personality, so it is easier to change. My neuroses are not huge monsters anymore, and now they are little schmoos that I invite over for tea. Would you not say he found a way to rest in the middle of things, to not be about having to have that feeling of rest, be dependent upon something external that we may or may not ever be able to control? Namaste.